All right, welcome to a special presentation of the Black Swamp Football Podcast powered by the Gerken Companies. We're going to talk about the state of Ohio's football playoffs. It's a subject that's a hot-button topic the last few years, and joined by co-host Scott Barrett for these episodes. I'm Lynn Groll, joined by Delta head coach Mike Vicars, longtime Patrick Henry head coach Bill Inselmann, and Eastwood head coach Sam Cotterman. Guys, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. We appreciate it.
Credibility in the room to talk about a pretty sensitive topic, get guys that are tracking for Hall of Fames, et cetera. It's kind of nice to have that. And then Liberty Center gets to play Eastwood this year, and great program. So we're very thankful for you guys coming in tonight.
Scott's going to help me co-host these. We're also going to talk to some administrators, ADs for another part of this, doctors and physicians as well, Scott, and then also we're going to talk to some basketball coaches here in a couple weeks.
Sounds like a lot of happy people we'll be talking to about the football playoff.
We hope so. We hope so. Since the OHSAA has went to 16 teams per region in 2021, it's been a big discussion.
It has.
And we have been part of a independent group that has met. I did not join the group until last fall, and Scott, you had formed this group, about a year before that?
Yeah, we've been working for about 21 months now, maybe, something like that.
What was the genesis behind starting this?
I don't know. You just start thinking about, teams that have a chance to win a state championship playing with, if you consider scrimmages, which I do, you're banging in scrimmages pretty intensely. So you got 18 straight weeks of play, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm at the old Oak and Bucky game, Purdue in Indiana, because Purdue isn't very good. A couple of years ago, we were a little bit better, and I'm sitting there going, Purdue's going to end their season, Indiana's going to end their season like the 24th of November, and they get a bye or two. I think they get 2 byes in the Big Ten. A bunch of men playing, they get byes and they're done. And a bunch of 15, 16-year-olds are going to play 18 consecutive weeks. And I kind of felt a little guilty about it. And of course, my son plays, but I coached with Rex Lindgren for 21 years here as an assistant, and Bill and Mike both know that. And I love football as much as anybody around here. If you don't love football, you might as well move out. You move to Pettiesville or something like that, right? But I just felt like, these players, we're putting them in the amphitheater, and they're gladiators, and we're just adults just loving it. And I just felt like it kind of hit the apex. Like we played Coldwater, and legendary broadcaster stopped his post game. I remember it like it was yesterday, and says, I'm gonna offend some people from certain parts of the state. We're playing too much football for these kids. We're playing too much. They're banged up. This is not their best. This is not best for them. They're not at their best. And we go play Perry, and we're at 65%. I just didn't see the logic in playing so many games. Those first 2 rounds made no sense to me. And I just felt like, and I started to talk about it in social media, and I got a lot of support for it. Certainly Mike started texting me, and other coaches and administrators and OHSAA former directors and et cetera. It kind of grew, and I said, we need to do something about it. And we started meeting and devising some strategies to approach the OHSAA and the Coaches Association, and here we are today.
Yeah, and I've had those same conversations with coaches, and these 3 guys are 3 of them that I talked to, and I've talked to dozens, maybe hundreds of coaches that touched on the playoff subject. I remember going back, it was after the COVID year of 2020, we're early in 2021, and I start hearing some rumblings of the state wants to go to 16. I don't know if you guys remember that, but there was some rumblings that they wanted to go to 16. The Coaches Association had pushed for years to go to 12. The coaches around the state, majority of them, wanted 12. They actually did a survey, the Coaches Association, back in April and May of 2021, giving you a little background on how the playoffs got to where they were. The options on that survey were 12 or 16. There was not 8, which was before the COVID year of 2020. We were at 8 teams. They polled all the coaches, sent the survey to 711 coaches. 486 responded, so a 68% response rate. 342 voted for 12, 144 voted for 16. So 70% voted for 12 for full disclosure. They asked the OHSAA to pause going to 16, and obviously that has not happened, and here we are 5 years later.
And to be clear, the association, one of the officers supported that approach that they made to the OHSAA to pause the 16 game. The OHSAA was alerted, was shown the evidence of the coaches, and they chose to ignore it. And that was another big motivating factor as to why we wanted to dig deeper into the rank and file. The guys are doing this every day, not an executive committee guy. We just wanted to do something independent and learn more about this Coaches Association survey and do our own work. And the work we did was very consistent with what the coaches had done. So we're like, why isn't the OHSAA, and Doug, you listening to the people that do this every day? That was my big takeaway from those surveys.
Right. And we want to represent, in a way, the coaches, the Coaches Association, the student athletes, and show support and kind of what we're doing.
Yeah,
and we're hoping that's where we get with this. The Ohio High School Football Coaches Association actually sent out an immediate release on June 15th of 2021 when all this was going on. And in that statement, they said, recently members of the Ohio High School Football Coaches Association met with the OHSAA board. Our meeting was an attempt to seek a pause to the 16-team playoff expansion that is to take effect at the end of the 2021 high school football regular season. We are asking the OHSAA to revert back to the original 12-team playoff proposal. The 12-team playoff model was reflective of nearly 70% of our member coaches. Despite this attempt, the OHSAA voted to continue with the 16-team playoff system. The Ohio High School Football Coaches Association went on to say, we are disappointed with this outcome. However, we will continue to work towards the goals that reflect our members, are supportive of our student athletes, and uphold the integrity of the game of football. Thank you to all those that reached out and voiced their concerns to the Ohio High School Football Coaches Association and the OHSAA board members considering this issue. Some data points from the last 4 years. 448 teams make the playoffs every year, 16 teams times the 28 regions. That's 1,792 teams the last 4 years going into a 16-team playoff for each region. The last 4 years, 896 teams have been seeded 9 through 16 and played on the road on the first week of the playoffs. Out of those, 170 have won in the first round, which is 19%. Out of those 170 teams that won in the first round, 27 of them won in the second round. Out of those 27 that won in the second round, just 6 of them won again in the regional semis. So that's 6 out of 896, 0.0067%. Out of those 6 teams that won the regional semis, only one, Springfield back in 2023, won the regional final and got to the state championship game. So we've had one of 896 teams from that 9 to 16 range that has made a pretty promising run in the playoffs. What do you make of that, guys?
Well, Lynn, I'll speak from my experience as Bill Inselmann. Of the 7 times we've been fortunate to get to the Final Four, 6 of those times, as Mike very well knows, our region, they almost always pair us south, and we end up playing a MAC school. So in our situation, we've been in the 5th round of the playoffs several times, playing a MAC school, and then if you would beat them, then you finally get to go to Canton. And we have been beat up multiple times before that game, and then after that game, but we've never been fortunate to beat a MAC school. To me, it's just the wear and tear on the body that I think is, football's a different sport. And when you sit back and think about what a basketball and a baseball season, our regular season are like, and imagine we're asking these young men to play another full half of a season longer. That's amazing. So those times we were in that, sometimes it was a full half season later. To me, it's just a big grind physically on those athletes. And I just think it's very difficult to play that many quality games and give kids 140 snaps a game times how many weeks, week after week. And I just think football's a different sport. It always has been. And Mike and I and Sam, we've been around long enough that football never was a sport where everybody was getting in the playoffs and not meant to get into the playoffs. And Personally, I'd like to see it go back to 8, but I do understand there are those situations where you have some good teams with good records that might not get in. But without a doubt, gone to the 12 instead of the 16 teams, I feel physically the wear and tear on the players is the best thing.
Plus, you have the 2 scrimmages at the beginning of the season, so technically
which
you're
no one
playing
ever talks about.
18. You're playing 18 straight weeks. NFL doesn't do that. College football doesn't do that. They have 2 bye weeks, and then you have 2-3 weeks off before you get to a bowl game, and then another week and a half before you play another game. And how the playoff system is, it's pretty spread out as compared to high school football. It's like you said, it's a grind. And what are we doing to these student athletes? 14, 15, 16, 17. 18-year-olds.
Yeah, you can't forget about the scrimmages. I'll tell you a little story. When we used to go up scrimmages against Dan Koke and Randy Donald at Otsego, they were wars. 2 years out of 3 years, we lost a captain, 2-way starter for the season in that scrimmage. And I said at that point on, I'm not going to name a starter or a captain until after scrimmages are over. And that's just a little bit, I guess, of me being, worried about that. But you're right. You put scrimmages with the regular season, tack on 4-5 weeks. I just think it's too much football.
As you pass the mic to one of the coaches, we were talking about these games, and the state champion plays 16, and I mean, 16 is a lot. I said, guys, we're not even talking about scrimmages. We coach scrimmages like they're games. Our kids are getting at it. To your Otsego example, that is 18 straight weeks of just physicality that I think is the wear and tear is I don't know if it captures how much it weighs on the student athlete. So that was a huge part of our presentation to the OHSAA when I talked to Bo and said, listen, this is 18. We don't have to scrimmage. You don't have to play these games. You do. You've been playing these games, but we play these games. So, Mike, you talk about we've talked a ton about this, but your group qualifies for a playoff. You're a 14 seed. You travel 2.5 hours. You have one heck of a football game. But talk about that week 7 and 8 moment where your young guys just wore out and just didn't have a lot of juice left.
Well, I think maybe it's the grandpa in me. There's a lot of emotions. Just listening to Bill talk right there, there's a lot of emotions that go through. And I want to add onto that 18 just a little bit. There's a lot that has changed through the years, and Bill would agree, I'm sure will agree with this, just in our preparation of getting to the season, which you can tack right onto those 18 weeks of, the scrimmages and the football games and those other types of things. We're now in pads in the middle of July. Something that's, Bill, when I played, and I'm sure it was you're a year or two older than me. I mean, we worried. The biggest worries we had was we played Acme baseball in the summer and showed up a couple of weeks before football started with conditioning. We couldn't even get a football out, and now we're having camp days before school was even out in May. And I think when not only the physical wear and tear, I'm talking about the love of the game of football.
Yep.
Of, if you're a 3-sport athlete, I had a friend a couple of years ago, we were discussing this. He said his son had like 2 days off in the summer because of football commitment and basketball commitment, baseball commitment, and those types of things. And I think not only I think we need to worry about the physical aspect, but, as well as that mental aspect, especially now. I mean, if you you get 13 days, but then you get your 5 acclimation days to get everybody prepared and pads. You got 18 days in the summer. You really stack this up. And when you talk about that, okay, we just came off of, week 8. And I believe week 8, we had played Bill's team. And or we were going into Bill's team is what we were doing. We had just won, I think, the week before against somebody, and then we had to play against Patrick Henry at home. And our kids were pretty tired. We just hit that point where there's not much left in the season. And I told our young guys, we played I think we lettered 5 freshmen last year. 3 of those kids started in the backfield, and I can remember standing up from the team on Monday and guys. We're sitting here right now. We're 6-2, and did you ever think about if you were to play for the state championship, you just hit the halfway point of our season? And we were tired, and we were hurting, and we were beat up, and I think it's that compounding effect of all of those days that you add onto it. I just think that's something that we have to think about. If I could go back and let's talk about the playoff aspect of it too, of adding of what we've had here. Previous to in Bill and I's playing days, there was a point in time, and I don't know if you finished your career before the computer points came about, where it was like just AP voting where the football teams got in. When I was a senior, we had 2 teams that made the playoffs in each region, and so there was 8 total teams across this in each division. And at the time, I believe there was only 5 divisions, if I remember right. I was a part of that first Liberty Center team that ever made the playoffs, and it was a really special and unique thing. And, even at 4 teams, it was really a super, super special thing. And there was those teams of the Liberty Center teams, and you may have had a team that kind of maybe, anybody remember that finished 5 and maybe got left out in that regard. And, and so that when they expanded 8, I thought, they got it. They got it. I understand there might be a 10-0 team somewhere that was number 9 and whatnot, but you had to play probably a pretty weak schedule not to get into the playoffs. So it was a really special thing. And I can remember pre-COVID when our teams would make the playoffs, we literally sold thousands of dollars worth of T-shirts, playoff T-shirts, thousands and thousands. I remember one year we sold, when I was at Genoa, I think we sold $30,000 in T-shirts. There was this special, unique thing. And I agree with Bill. Not everybody is equipped to be in the playoffs. This isn't basketball. No shot clocks, where you can hold the ball and you can have 1 or 2 guys on your team. Upsets don't happen in football unless you get a super muddy night or something like that where God has stepped in and has determined the difference. In football, the superior team most of the time is going to win, especially when it's a 1 versus a 16. Not only is the superior team going to win, it's going to be a very lopsided situation. And and in these circumstances too, like you mentioned, we traveled almost 3 hours to go play a football game this year. And I think there comes a point when you look at the data, what are we doing? Because we have a pretty good idea that teams are going to be in the the regional final representatives. There's no doubt about it. It shakes out just by seed alone in just about 95% of the cases. And when we've got this many teams and we're dragging it out this long, there becomes this competitive imbalance that's really, really bad. And to the point now, I think we have to sit back and look at, we have teams that are dropping out that want nothing to do with the tournament. And now we've got to go and beg teams to get their equipment back out. So the number 1 seed, and I'm speaking about Marion local situation that they had last year, where they've got to go to somebody that they had beaten earlier in the year. They had collected all their gear, get them back out so they can play a game. And I think now is the time we need to start thinking about this. But it seemed like you had something you wanted to add there to that.
Well, I'm going to show my age here. Scott, you remember this, and Mike, and Sam and Lynn, I don't know if you were born yet or not, but in 1977, my junior year, if everybody wants to think back how big the playoffs have expanded, my junior year in 77, it was a single A, double A, and triple A. That's all you had. Now we have 7 divisions. It was just single A, double A, triple A, 1 team from each region.
Right.
There were 12 teams in the state of Ohio. And Patrick Henry, under Bob Bowerly, we were fortunate to be one of them. 12 teams. That's where we've evolved. And I think Hobie Krause and Montpelier might have been the only league school, I think
73 and 75 for Hobie. I think he did it twice.
Early 72.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
And
early 70s.
So obviously, we don't want to go back to the dinosaurs, okay?
Yeah.
But Mike's right. Okay.
It's perspective. It's perspective.
Yes, that's right. It's just, I think, gone too far the other extreme.
Yeah, and I just kind of wanted to wrap it up by adding this, is that, you've heard me say it so many times, Scott, I think sometimes less is more.
100%.
And I think we've reached that point, and I think we have data in front of us, we have results in front of us. I think if you talk to some sports psychologists and some doctors that are seeing the things that they're seeing now, I think those are things that we have to really consider. And let's face it, I don't know the exact data, but I know in my tenure of, coming up on my 30th year as a head coach, I mean, we're talking like 1%, less than 1% of the kids that have ever played for me and that I've played against go on and play anywhere else than this right here. You know, they're not going to college, let alone. I mean, Michael Dieter did play for us, and he's in the NFL, but that is such a rare thing. And to think these kids are playing because they love football. They're playing because of their friends are playing football. They want to be together. And I think we're kind of spoiling this a little bit. You know, we're making this a little bit of a drag for these guys at what expense?
Sam?
Yeah. Kind of piggyback off what you guys were saying. I thought when they went to 8, they nailed it. And I thought that was a good move. And when you guys had sent out that survey, 8 was my vote. Honestly, if we would even go to 12, just one team gets a bye. If one of those teams that got the bye makes it to the state finals, okay, we're saving a game. But you know, we can still play 16 teams,
right,
or 16 games and 18 with the scrimmages. But I just thought I didn't have a problem with 8, but if others felt that there needed to be an adjustment, I feel like there could have been smaller adjustments made. I like the idea of the strength of schedule component. And again, that can be worked out in time, but I think when we went to 16, we just widened the plate so much. And like you guys have said, just made it harder on kids' bodies, and the 16 games isn't realistic to me. But
talk about that a little more, Coach, because I talk to these guys a lot. I've listened, so has Lynn, but you know, you're dealing in a league and you've got a lot going on where you play and rivalries and bigger schools and different things you're doing. What do you see the welfare? How do you see the welfare issue, the player welfare, mentally and physically, late in that season, heading into a playoff? Are your kids at their best, or are they starting to show the wear and tear?
Oh yeah, definitely showing the wear and tear. And we haven't had the luxury yet, of making a long run. We actually had to travel down to Norway this year after Coach Vicars, and you're on week 12 and your kids are in a bus ride for 3 hours and they're already tired. You could definitely see the wear and tear. And I mean, it's already takes a lot of luck to get into that state finals match, and now you're just needing so much more luck and things to go your way to stay healthy, and keeping, especially at a small school like ours, one guy goes down and that could be, it just means so much. So I feel like we just widen the plate way too much.
Yeah, for sure.
Coach, speaking of the margin of victories, went back the last 3 years. Drew Pastores helped me out with this. He did not have data from 2021. Number one seeds since 2021 have their average margin of victory is 39.7 points in the first round. 2 seeds are winning by a margin of 31.3. 3 seeds are winning by 28.7. 4 seeds, the gap narrows a little bit, 18.7. 5 seeds winning at an average of 20.3 points per game. 6 seeds, 17, 7-10 matchup. The 7 seeds own an 8.7 margin of victory, and then actually 9 seeds have averaged a little bit better margin of victory over 8s by 5 points. 9 seeds have beaten the 8 seeds over the years. And then seeds, you said, we know who's going to win these regions.
There's no doubt.
Number 1 seeds have won 62 of the 112 regional championships since the start of the 16-team playoff. 2 seeds, there's been 17, 9 3 seeds, 8 4 seeds, 9 5 seeds, 2 6 seeds, 4 7 seeds, and then from 8 to 12, Springfield is the only team.
We have one outlier.
Is the only one.
Yeah.
And if you looked at their schedule, speaking of strength of schedule component, 4 of the 5 teams they lost to in the regular season made the playoffs, and they also played DeMatha out of Maryland, who is, if you follow national high school football, they're a national power. That's who they played. So they had prepared themselves. You saw a team like Delphus St. John's a year ago, playing the MAC, makes a run to the regional championship game. Didn't win against Columbus Grove, but made it close. We actually had 3 teams a year ago outside the top 8. Archbishop Alder was a 10, lost in the regional championship to Taft, and then Wheelersburg, who was a 14, lost 55-0 to Ironton. The data is there. What are we doing? And Bill and you and I have talked about this. The football playoffs, it's not all these other sports, nothing against these other sports. We're trying to find a champion. We're not trying to give a participation trophy to some team that won 2 games in the regular season or went 4-6. Well, you should have won a few more games if you want to be a part of this. The high school football playoffs, in my mind, I didn't play high school football, but it should be special, like you said. It used to be, when I was growing up, I went to Ayersville, we had teams in the 80s. I mean, it was the whole community gathered around the football team. And now you go to a first round, second round playoff game, and it's like a morgue. It's almost like a funeral.
Here's something else to think about. I'll bet Sam and Mike have been here too. Those first couple rounds of games, if you're fortunate enough to play up to your capability and you're ahead by those margins you talked about, which mind you is a running clock, what's the number one thing in your mind? Get those key starters out.
Healthy.
And I'm literally yelling at my assistants, get so-and-so out, get so-and-so out. We can't have them get injured.
Get it over with.
Okay, so there we are in the third quarter, and I'm thinking more about, okay, we got to get out of this healthy because next week's going to be tougher, and then if we win that, look out. So here we are worried about avoiding injuries.
I want to ask you guys that. Are you worried about those first round games? And I know, Mike, you haven't had maybe the teams that you had earlier in your career. What goes through your mind that week of, you're going to win. What do you do that week of practice?
Well, we work very hard on fundamentals, okay? But you still can't take it light because, I don't care if it's North Central a year ago or whatever it be. They're excited. They're happy to be there, and you want to avoid an injury is what it boils down to. You want to get on to the next level the next week and avoid that injury. That's what it boils down to.
You're already, at least for us, we're already tailoring things down towards the end of the season with the 10 weeks and trying to make sure we're not doing anything dumb in practice to get anybody injured. And now, you're adding 6 more weeks on there, and you try to find that fine line of how much can you tailor off and keep, 14, 15, 16 to 18-year-old kids still ready to play physically and making sure they're ready, but also not doing danger to their body and their mind. So
as you pass the mic to Mike, that's what we talk about a lot. Mike, we've had this discussion, is the risk reward for that first round game. I mean, is it even a healthy practice for a 1 seed to have to get into a game with a 16 and really try to measure whether it's productive? I mean, the numbers clearly state it's not. And Sam, you nailed it. I mean, you said everything I wanted to say about sweet spot. And the numbers just take you right to the 8 team. Every data point that we can see, outside of some outliers, and I think, Bill, we talked about this at your house, point to a healthy balance of an 8-team regional. Yet, we've moved to a 16-team regional. We're going to talk about the motivations or what we think that's about, whether it's culturally about participation, and that's how administrators are judged, and principals. Look at how many kids we got playing sports and games, and some of that's good, but this football thing, the violence and the collision piece just makes it such, as Bill said, unique.
Yeah, I want to take this. I want people that listen to this really think about a different angle. These guys kind of hit it on the top part of the being the top seed and what that looks like. I would like people to really look at that bottom half of how some of those teams might feel. Now, granted, I know there's a lot of coaches that are younger nowadays. There's a lot of the head coaches and the coaches in high school football. It's really gotten to be a youthful game. A lot of us are kind of moving away from it at this point. But and some of them are excited and they've not been a part of the playoffs. But I think go back and look at the numbers deeply. You have teams that have qualified for playoffs that didn't win a game. You had teams that have lost 6, 7, 8, 9 games in a row and having to play a playoff game. Think about what those practices must be like for those teams. Kids are, in today's world, when I played, it was 16 millimeter film with Jim Meeker, and nobody took any videos home. We had no video in the cloud. I mean, we came in on Sunday night and watched film, and that was basically the film film was done. We didn't see much more film the rest of the week. Now these kids, they've got it on their phone all day long, and they can, we educate our kids of how to watch film now and whatnot. and they know. They know. And so when you're one of these 16 and 15 and 14, or like us last year as a 13 seed, and having to go play some of these people that you have to play, I mean, think about what it's like on their side of the coin, because, as coaches, we're competitors, and we're trying to get our kids ready, and we're doing everything that we can. But there still is a mental side of this that you have to consider. And here's the other thing that a lot of people don't think about. And I'm talking about, these teams that are in the 13, 14, 15, 16 slot. There's a next season, okay? We are delaying some of those kids that are multi-sport athletes to that next season too. And not only delaying those kids, but we're delaying those coaches to the next program. And I don't want to surprise anybody out there, but not every kid that plays football, it's their number one thing they love to do. Matter of fact, a lot of the kids that have played football for me over the years, that football wasn't their favorite sport. And
you had some pretty good wrestlers back in the Delta days, and now
absolutely. And I've had good basketball players and lots of just good athletes that football wasn't their number one thing. And it just seems like, what is the goal that we're dragging some of these teams that and we've had more and more teams bowing out. We've had, I think it was like Norwalk or somebody I looked last year. They'd lost 7 games in a row. They hadn't tasted victory since early September.
What did we say in our presentations? In Division I, there is 6 1-9 teams in a playoff. Do you talk about the disparity in talent, size, and strength? A 10-0 1 seed at Division I against a 1-9. Bill, what am I missing? That's not David Goliath. That is absolutely unnecessary physically. Those kids want no part of that matchup.
Yeah,
that's dangerous to me.
That's right. I mean, and that just doesn't make any sense in any area of competition. Competition is supposed to bring the best out in everybody, and the cream rises to the top. And that just makes no sense to do that. And Mike, you're right about that, the effect on other sports. I have always felt sorry for basketball and baseball coaches.
Yeah.
How many of those guys, just because of the previous success of the other coach in their school district, are way behind. I couldn't imagine, Mike, you getting 3 weeks of practice and 2 games in before I get to start practice. I guarantee I don't want to play you. And I think that as the seasons get longer, the effect on the athletes and what it does with the other sports needs to be emphasized as well.
That's a huge point. I want Sam to address this too, because I think Lynn and I talk about, it's not just the practices in the preseason. Now we've got May, and now we got 7-on-7s in June, and we got practices in July. I mean, just think about that. Think about that. Now you've got a perpetual weight room. That's like nonstop. That's 10, 11 months. I know it enhances basketball, or it might help a baseball guy, but really that weight room in essence is a football mentality weight room in a lot of places. Where does it, we've talked orthopedic
I have
guys.
20 questions I want to ask right now. And I want to make a point real quick, because we had
20 or 40?
I don't know. I mean, we
get Sam here. I want him to answer that one for me.
But probably the biggest eye-opener in this whole process for me since I got involved with your group, we had an athletic trainer come in one day, and they said nobody thinks about the mental aspect and the mental load that our student athletes are under. And they said, I see it. I'm almost like a psychologist for these kids, and I didn't even think about that. What are we doing?
Sam, talk about that part. Talk about the weight room. Talk about the kid. Where's the break for these guys? Where's the break for you guys? And I know you love it, but you got a family and a job, man. You got to mow your grass.
Yeah.
And not in the fall, you don't mow grass.
For years when I was the assistant at Perrysburg, and I was also the head wrestling coach at Perrysburg, so we would, I'm not going to lie, we had a pretty good wrestling program, and they still do, but I'm getting ready for wrestling season in my mind. We're getting ready for the Ironman tournament, and I got a couple guys, obviously being a football coach and a wrestling coach, I was able to get a lot of wrestlers to come out for football, and we had some guys that were still on the football team, and I'm trying to figure out, at what point can I tell them, well, you guys are going to have to wait and not start your season until, this certain time, and are they going to be able to go to Ironman, which obviously is a huge tournament, and these kids want to go and compete there, but if you're going weeks into the playoffs, you can't put your kid in that situation where they're not going to be prepared for that tournament. And sometimes they are also thinking about, kind of like what Coach Vicars said, there is that next season, and some of those kids they get beat up on the football field, and they love the game, but they're starting to think about that next season and what's going to happen, and whether it be on the court or on the mat or on the baseball field. So yeah, again, one of those things where you're trying to keep them focused on that task at hand, and again, trying to get a teenager to focus on that one thing is a difficult task.
Bill, we talked about this same thing Lynn's talking about, the mental piece, and one of the things I took away from our conversation that really struck me, and I told this to Lynn in our group, that the spring, we piled on the spring and how unnecessary the spring is. And I understand, you've got D1 coaches in the state of Ohio, and you got Ryan Day, and you got, these guys have been pushing spring football, and you said, we don't do it. We basically, we don't do it because we want to have good spring sports. We want our kids to enjoy other things. And I even think you said, correct me if I'm wrong, not necessary for us. It's just not a necessary thing. You even kind of chided Casey a little bit, like, he doesn't need we don't need spring, man. It's just more we pile on these kids. Talk about that a little bit.
Okay, so you're allowed then to start in May if you want to.
Right.
And like you said, Scott, this is something that Urban Meyer wanted.
Right.
And then Ryan Day, and it's for the big schools, and they're probably in a different situation than Sam and Mike and I are.
Single sport
we
guys.
are small school.
Yeah. It's a little bit of an outlet for some of those.
Yeah, and
kids in
it's a
those
way
communities.
they can showcase their talents, go
Yeah.
to these big tournaments, right, and get
Camps.
recruited. But let's talk about now Patrick Henry and Division 5, 6, and 7 schools. We basically just want to let the kids enjoy their spring sport, all right? And I went and watched our baseball game last night against Archibald. When would I ask my football players playing baseball to come out and practice with me in May? Why would I ever do that? Number one, risk an injury.
For sure.
And then mentally, are they really going to be into it? And why would I want to interfere with my baseball coach's season? Everybody knows how tough track is on the muscles, long jumping, high jumping, hurdles. And I'm going to ask my football players that run track to come and practice in May. I have no desire. I don't need to practice in May to win. And I don't think any coach in the state of Ohio needs to practice in May to win. But I respect and I understand the big division schools whose athletes are being recruited, fiercely recruited in the nation. So I respect that. I'm just saying, for me at Division 6 at Patrick Henry, I don't want and need that spring to practice.
One of the guys in our group talked about it being, this could be, you slice it two ways. The small school group has a calendar that they can manage, knowing they've got 2, 3, and sometimes 4 sport athletes with the track and baseball, sometimes sharing softball, track. And the big schools, some of those coaches fed back to us saying, hey, we want to keep these kids occupied, and we're tutoring them, we're working with them, and it's a productive thing. Some of those urban areas can be a little bit different environment than what we're used to here. So I see both sides of it as well, but I guess my biggest concern, one of my concerns, was how much more are we going to ask of our athletes? And when our athletic trainer that came in and spoke to us, anonymous, and we were talking about injuries, right? Injuries, and all of a sudden we're talking about, you guys don't know the mental aspect. These kids are worried about school. They're worried about, worried about FFA. They're worried about
a girlfriend.
They're worried about other things than preparing for week 16 or 14 or 13.
Yeah.
So that opened my eyes to that, how difficult it can be, Mike, on an athlete.
Yeah, and here's something else to look at. Let's look at some of these small school athletes. You've got kids at Patrick Henry playing Acme baseball. Multiple of those kids also play Legion baseball, and they love the sport. I respect that. And then they want to play basketball, numerous of those athletes. So you're in a summer league, you come in for your summer shootouts there. Then the football coach is dragging in the weight room and he's doing 7-on-7s.
I want you to be there.
There you go.
And you better be there.
You got it.
Imagine all that tearing and then increasing the amount of days and requirements. And let me tell you something, people. You can say pressure is self-inflicted, okay, for coaches. Maybe it is self-inflicted, but if you don't win, we all know what happens. So if you don't use your days and somebody else does, and then all the coaches are feeling like that.
Think you're gonna
in
be
all
behind.
the sports.
Gonna
You're
be
going to be
behind.
behind. Then the kids feel the pressure. It's kind of relentless.
Let me pause here, and can I take a break? And I have a couple questions feeding off that.
Who says a college degree is the only path to a fulfilling career? At the Gerken Companies, we offer rewarding livelihoods with or without a degree. Gerken provides a generous benefits package, continuous training, top-notch equipment, and a culture that rewards effort. We're looking for rock-solid performers to help build and reinforce the region's infrastructure. Whether you have construction experience or are just starting your career, apply now at gerkencompanies.com/careers.
American Freedom Energy and Grandma's General Store off Route 24 on State Route 109, just south of Liberty Center, now has 88 unleaded fuel and is your one-stop shop for fuel, food, drinks, and much, much more, including locally raised meats and home-baked goods. American Freedom Energy and Grandma's General Store is proud to support Black Swamp Football and is the host of the Black Swamp Football podcast, football show, and Saturday mornings Rise and Rewind. Stop in and see Glenn and Greg today and make American Freedom Energy and Grandma's General Store a part of your everyday routine. Welcome back to the Black Swamp Football Podcast, presented by the Gerken Companies. Also, thanks to our hosts here, American Freedom Energy, Glenn and Greg Badenhop, for their support and hospitality over the years. We appreciate that so much. Joined again by Eastwood head coach Sam Cotterman, Bill Inselmann from Patrick Henry, Mike Vicars from Delta, Scott Barrett, who's helping me out with these podcasts that we're doing, talking about some football, and we're going to get into some basketball, some other topics as well, and who knows where we'll go.
A lot to discuss.
Yes,
A lot
for
to
sure,
discuss.
for sure. I got a couple questions on the spring thing, because a lot of people, I'll play devil's advocate here. So I've had a lot of people tell me, because we don't have spring football, our kids in Ohio are not getting recruited anymore. We're falling behind the Texases, the Floridas, Californias, whoever has spring ball. And I know you guys are not coaching at a bigger school. Sam, you spent some time at Perrysburg, obviously. It's a bigger school. Elaborate on that for me a little bit. Are we falling behind other states because we don't have spring football in your mind?
In my mind, no. At least when I was growing up and even my first years coaching, I would listen to college coaches talk about how much they loved recruiting multi-sport athletes.
Mm-hmm.
So if that is the case, then these kids playing basketball or playing baseball or wrestling, they're still competing. They're still, I don't think that's going to make them run a fade route any better or any worse, I should say. If they're running down the basketball court sinking a three. So, it is my opinion, but I do not think that's a reason we're falling behind. And like we've already said, we're still taking away from those multi-sport athletes if we start pushing spring stuff, and I'm not for that.
Is it just an excuse?
Yeah.
Why we falling behind other states?
Just because they want to play spring football so bad,
I mean, I can understand in some of those states where, their weather might be a little better year-round, and they can get a football out at any time, and maybe, they want to do that stuff. But, but again, maybe those are the bigger schools that we were already talking about that have those kids that only play football, and those kids want something to do during that springtime. But in the situations that I've been around, even at Perrysburg, we had plenty of at least two sport athletes that, the spring football would have been a big ask out of them. And again, we're still bringing up the injury portion. So I know it's not as physical, but, you're still out in the field running around.
And those southern schools, they're done with their spring sports almost right now. They're in their tournaments. They have all of May they can throw the football around.
For sure.
They don't have nothing else going on because their spring sports start in February.
When we spoke to the executive committee of the Coaches Association, the first basically two speakers in that meeting were Division I football coaches. They were Ohio State. Of course, they got the standing ovation, as they should have, and then there was a Wisconsin coach there. And the first things outside of the greetings, they talked about roster limits and the de-emphasis on recruiting high school kids. We're going to recruit portal. We're going to recruit NAIA Division II. We're going to recruit our own kids to come back, and then we'll get to the high school kids. Not saying that high school recruiting isn't important, because it is, but it's not nearly as important as it once was. Maybe back in my day, I played a little bit of Eastern Michigan before I transferred, and that's all they did. They talked, it was a glamorized thing, was the high school recruiting. So they're saying, send your kids to NAI, send your kids to Division II, because there's opportunity, and we'll take a look at them after 2 or 3 years in a weight room and becoming a man. And I'm thinking to myself, we're adding all this extra football, yet it looks like there might be a little bit of a shift at the college level. Maybe they're not going to spend as much time recruiting those high school kids. So do we really need that platform like they used to make that case with Urban and Ryan? And what am I missing about that rationale?
Well, Scott, I kind of want to use this informative too. I want to ask Sam and Mike, have you noticed in the last year or two a decrease in the amount of college coaches in your hallway and coming and looking at your athletes? I have. We do not see as many college coaches coming to look and recruit our athletes in the last 2 years. Very noticeable. Is that true at your schools?
Yeah, and this is only my first year at Eastwood teaching, so I was still teaching at Perrysburg last year when I took over. But I'll put it this way: I got a lot more calls that coaches were coming, and then I would tell them I couldn't be there until a certain time if they wanted to stop by, compared to this year has been very, very minimal.
Yeah, I sat in that meeting, and basically it's pretty much spelled out. If you're not a 5-star kid, you're probably not. I mean, the coaches said it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, go D2, go NAI.
Yeah,
said that.
I mean, first of all, you got to realize, and everybody knows this because it's in the news, is these teams are turning over a third of their roster every year.
Minimally.
That's not, that's not including the kids that are gonna come in. And because of that, they flat out said, guys, we need those scholarships and we need that money for the kids that are transferring out of the portal. And so we've got to work that. And so, it makes you really feel for the Mid-American Conference schools and all those schools on that side. They're getting cherry-picked all the time. Their best guys are being pulled out of there and they're being brought in. And we all, the whole NIL thing and everything is just flipping upside down. I don't think anybody knows. Look what happened at Tennessee over the weekend with their number one quarterback.
Well, did you see he wasn't even going to play in their playoff game?
Yeah.
They didn't give him a raise.
Yeah, so I think a lot of that is really going to be de-emphasized a lot because of the situation. There's just so many things that are changed. And, and I still think, especially for us, we want our kids to love the game. And I think if we start asking even more out of them, and the only thing we're going to do is we're going to push more and more kids away. And especially, we're in a world, I think, of have and have-nots. I think if you have it, you've got kids and they're coming to you. And I think if you don't, boy, it's really hard. And we're kind of in that mid-grade of that, of those schools at Delta right now. And, when they leave you in November, you wonder who's coming back, because that's just kind of how it is nowadays. And I think if we add even more to it, we're really looking for some trouble.
I talk to a lot of coaches that tell me they do not understand how college recruiting works anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good point.
Is that something that, is it a little more confusing for you guys as you've gained more experience in coaching? Has it changed?
I really think it has. I feel like we're being more and more left out. The small school with that athlete that comes along every 5 to 10 years that we think can play at that next level. Look at all the potential recruits they have. I'm trying to put myself in their shoes now. You're getting phone calls and you're getting emails about transfer portal. Why would you come to Patrick Henry sometimes and look at that marginal kid when like Scott said, here's a kid that's been lifting, playing football, and he's probably going to be maybe a better choice. So I just think it's more frustrating and we're being left out more and more. But that's out of our control.
And you listen to the recruiting folks, the experts. They always say, John McAllister, one of those from this area. You guys know John. But you have to go to the camps at the colleges, or they don't even look at you anymore, from my understanding.
Yep. John told me that this winter. I actually called him, Lynn. I said, I have a kid I'm trying to get out there, but I just, people aren't contacting me. He said, Bill, send them to their camp. That's the only shot you have.
Yeah.
You got to send them to their camp.
Glenville's been doing that for years. They get the kids on the bus and they do the tours, Toledo, BG, Purdue, wherever they're going. That's kind of what he's talking about.
And you run a fast time at one of those camps.
Boom.
They give you an offer, and then guess what? There's 10 more in the next week.
But go back to the original point, though. It's roster limits to 105. We're recruiting portals, NAI Division IIs, our own kids. Then we'll get to the high school. I mean, we are adding days, we're adding stress, we're adding calendar. These high school players that most of them aren't going to play collegiately. I think a lot of this caters to the big school, quite frankly. A lot of this playoff structure caters, the spring, the added coaching days. Because as we talked about, a lot of this stuff, infrastructure for us, is pretty unnecessary. And you were at Perrysburg. I mean, the spring football component, the recruiting component, how they de-emphasize some of the recruiting of the high school kids. Like, what's some of your guidance to some of the players you've had, whether wrestling or football, in terms of their recruitment and all the things that you're asking them to do for your football program?
You guys nailed it. I tell them they got to go to the camp.
Yeah.
Pretty much, like you guys said, with the portal and everything, already at a small school, we were, not as visual as those bigger schools. And, when you look at the level of where those coaches go, not very often they're going to come out to Sugar Ridge Road in Pemberville, Ohio. So, what I've told my kids is, I think you can play at that level, but go to their camp, let them see you. That may be the only chance that you're going to have. And it's already slim now with the portal and all that stuff. So
speak to that spring component too, in terms of, these coaches have talked about its necessity. The way you prepare, you've been an assistant at a big school, you're a head coach, second year. Talk about, is that spring component? Because I think that's what Mike's talking about. That's the thing Mike kind of got my head directed to after about 18 months. He's like, hey, this calendar is a lot for these kids. It's not just the 16 game, 18, like you're talking about 18 games, Barrett, with 2 scrimmages. I get that, but you ain't looking at the whole calendar that you guys are dealing with. That is, to me, people are looking at that. Why are we having this discussion so many days for these kids on these kids?
And I think we're losing a lot of coaches like these guys.
That's a whole other component.
It's a whole nother.
That's a podcast.
But we have coaches that should be coaching high school football that are great for high school kids. Are going to make them into better people when they grow up, make them into better husbands, fathers, grandfathers. And those mentors are leaving the game because of the pressure that you guys are under 24/7, 365.
And talk about that I want to hear your perspective, Sam, on the calendar
And Sam,
you put together.
you're a little bit younger than these guys.
Right.
I think it kind of goes back to what you were talking about with the risk reward.
Yeah.
Is there a possibility that college coaches are attending some of these 7-on-7s? I don't know. I'm not there. Maybe they are there. I also know that they're having their own spring ball. So I don't know how much they can really get out to these tournaments. So maybe there's that small piece that they might see you. But again, is it worth that? Because if you are a caliper kid and you're going to these camps, they're going to see you. They're going to see you in the fall and the summer, when you're attending those camps. I don't think it takes the spring 7-on-7 time to do so.
Well, that's the other thing too. When the OHSAA gave coaching days, Lynn, tell me if I'm wrong, because you're pretty, but they gave them to all sports, right? I mean, everybody's got so now the basketball coach gets some additional days, which is fair. Oh, wait, that's June, that's 7-on-7, that's weight room, that's baseball, Acme, wait, no, that's basketball. And I know basketball coaches will say around here, they'll talk about, well, gee, Scott, Liberty Center's going to play 16 games. I mean, my preseason's June. Like, that's fair. That's fair to say for a basketball coach. Wait a minute, they got Acme baseball, maybe they got Legion baseball, they certainly got weight room, now they got 7-on-7s.
Football's going to take a trip to Florida.
Or
not football, but wrestling.
Right. So what are we talking about? This is not you and me. We're going fishing. We'll take some time in June. These guys are asked to do 3-4 things a day, Coach. That just seems to me like no one's looking at that, and that's what really compelled me to. We need to have this discussion in a long form like we're doing.
Yeah, I was in that same battle of, it's like, man, you get the days. Are your opponents using them?
Yeah.
You want to use them, but kids, I want the kids to have fun in the summer. And, the only positive I could find of getting to start earlier in May was that I could maybe do one a week and give the kids a break. We'll do one practice. light and just throw the ball around to use that day, but I can't, in my mind, I can't sit there and go 13 and then another 5 in July before you even hit 2-a-days while the kids are playing baseball, AAU basketball, and I want them to go on vacation with their family. I want them to, hang out with their buddies at night and go to a bonfire. Like, I want them to be kids as well.
Bill, I want you to hit that real quick. I know Lynn's going to ask that too. Lynn, I know what's on the mind of kids today. I talk to them now. I'm doing radio, TV. We interview them, and they want to do that stuff. They want to do different things. They don't want to do just sports. But we're asking them to do all that all the time. We are. That's where the guilt comes in for me. When do we get? I think a big proponent of building an athlete, making them better, making them stronger, is we've lost that rest cycle. I would love to see key fob superintendent saying, drop the key fob on my desk July 1st, July 15th, you can get back to work, or something to give these kids a breather, take a vacation, go to your grandmother's house and mow her grass. I think these kids are overloaded, and I think the mental part of it is really starting to hurt our game.
One thing I've tried to do at PH, and I hope the kids know that I'm sincere, is I actually have a vacation chart up in my weight room where I want the kids to put down where you go and when you go. And I want them to understand that is 100% approved of by the football staff, and that we support that, and we want you to do that. And
kudos to you and your staff for doing that.
And you'd be surprised, though, that there's a lot of kids that still won't do it, or families that don't do it yet.
And that competitiveness,
they're worried about losing that spot and somebody else going around them. But and I guess maybe that, again, is because we're at a smaller school, and I don't want a kid to feel like you're ever going to miss out on an opportunity to play because you go on vacation. And you're surely not going to lose a starting spot because you're playing another sport as well as football. And because coaching is a lot more than just winning. So, but I think that pressure is obviously there on parents and players, and obviously as well on the coaches.
So everything we add from an OHSAA perspective, we're going full bore, because it's always on your mind. It never leaves your attention. You always have a calendar. Where is the downtime in this sport with 201 days, for example? I've seen calendars that are 202 days with weight room inclusion. This is not the NFL, Sam, Mike. This is high school football, 15-year-old guys. What am I missing here?
Well, I don't know. It's funny, Bill, you said that. I had them put up a great big whiteboard in the weight room, and I did the vacation thing because I wanted them to do the same thing. Talking about, going back to what Lynn said about guys that are leaving the game, and as coaches, we all get tired. I mean, I've stepped away, come back. Bill stepped away for a couple of years, came back. I mean, it's hard to get out of your blood and those types of things. But I'll tell you what's embarrassing as a father and a football coach. For me, I personally have gone on more vacations with my 3 sons and their families as adults than we ever did when they were in high school, because we were always so busy. They were basketball players and track guys and football guys, and I didn't want to leave the weight room because, and so when I came back this time, I said, I'm putting this board up, and I told the parents, go on vacation. There's probably better if you didn't do it real close to August, but go on vacation, and try to. Well, if you do, you do. But at the same time, because you need that reset, and plus, it's football. For crying out loud, great memories that you have with your families, and when you're together and you're other places. And I took my boys and a grandson a couple of years ago. We went 21 hours north into Canada and went fishing. One of the greatest trips we ever had. And I had to wait till they were adults to have that. That's dumb. And I think, this is the stack you're talking about.
You never know how much time you're going to have either.
Yeah, I mean, it's truly, we just talked about
we were before we came on.
Some circumstances that happened recently with some young people, and you're right. And so when we keep stacking these days and we ask for more and more and more, there's your mental aspect you're talking about. And some of this mental stress is hidden. It's hidden in the kid feeling the responsibility. I don't want to lose my spot. So even though Bill and Mike put their vacation board, some of them aren't going to leave. They're not going to leave because if I do, and I darn know with the culture that's here in Liberty Center, they're not leaving ever, never. You know.
When I started doing this, my son said to me, it was Sunday morning, he goes, Dad, I got a question for you. You love Rex Lindgren, you talk about football like it's religion here. When Sunday morning, it is kind of religion in Liberty Center.
No question.
And I said, listen, man, I've seen it now. I've seen the other side of it. You guys, maybe you're a little younger, but you guys have seen it. It's like, we got to take some of this away from you for you to enjoy it more. You need to do other things in your life. And there was a lot of frustration at home for a while because he didn't understand, because I worship Rex Lindgren. I love Casey Moeller. We do football here like no other. We think we do. But I just feel, and it's the OHSAA that kind of set those.
Yeah.
They keep moving the bar. We just keep meeting it.
Yeah.
Why don't we lessen that commitment, and we'll meet that too? And that's what I'm thinking.
At some point, the adults
Well, that's the adults are going to have to do it.
Have to take over. And Tom Held I always had this conversation with Tom Held, the great baseball coach of Defiance, Hall of Fame, one of the greatest baseball coaches, not in Ohio, in our whole
in the country.
And he always said, people complain, well, kids are playing video games and when they're at home. Well, he said, what else do you expect them to do? They're kids. They should get that time. Like you said, bonfires, hanging out with their buddies, doing all that stuff, spending time with their families, mowing their grandparents' yard, all of that stuff. Kids don't get that, I don't feel like, anymore. And if we're not listening to somebody like Tom Held and you three guys that have experienced and have been through it, what are we doing? Who are we going to listen to if we don't listen to the experts?
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback what you guys are talking about. We take two weeks in the summer where I tell you will never, as long as I'm the coach, we will never practice during these weeks. We won't lift, we won't practice. So if you're one of those guys that does not want to miss a practice and you're not going to take a vacation, well, I'm telling you, here's 2 weeks of vacation. So tell your parents to schedule something, get you guys out of town and have some fun. So I just hope that if I schedule those, and then maybe it stops the vacation from right before, we got to leave. But
You're starting to see districts, though, Sam, the leaders of those districts saying, we're going to shut this down ourselves.
Yeah.
Like I've heard, I visited some schools and superintendents and ADs are saying, we now have seen it. We understand what the coaching staff wants. We understand what basketball and all these guys want. We get it. But we're thinking about kids first, not the coach's schedule, not what they want in a weight room. We need to think about them first. And I'm hearing more of that. You're doing it yourself now. The OHSAA is giving you everything no one wants. Yeah. Like it's just giving you everything that no one really wants, Bill. And that's where we wanted to make a stand. Because I think you were telling us that before COVID on that. Let's look at the 12 a little bit. Maybe let's stay with the 8, And you guys were saying that in the Coaches Association and being ignored. I felt like we've gone too far.
Yeah, it's gotten more and more and more. As more teams are in the playoffs, there's more coaching days. Now we're into May.
Yep.
Like Mike said, you're starting to have your acclimation days in July.
Crazy.
And the season's
nuts.
longer than ever. It's a lot.
Has our football in this immediate area deteriorated from 30 years ago, 20 years ago?
Can I ask that a different way? Because
Yeah.
it's the same question, because you and I talk about this like daily. Is our football better? Is our football better today than it was 20 years ago, than it was 30 years in terms of participation? Now, Liberty Center's got 75 kids. We're an anomaly, or 72 kids. But across those rosters in the small mid-sized schools,
Northwest Ohio.
across North, is this new calendar, this expanded playoff for participation, okay? Is it helping our game? Is our game better today? Are leagues more competitive? Are these games more competitive as I look at the non-competitive numbers? I'm asking it rhetorically, but I want to hear your answer to that.
There's a lot there. I will say this, okay? Our numbers at PH have gone down over the last 15 years. When I first started, be my 33rd year at PH, when we first started, I started coaching, we had a separate freshman team, separate JV, and varsity. We haven't had a freshman team for 18 years.
You couldn't survive in the league.
Couldn't,
You didn't have those.
Yeah.
You had to have them.
You had to have it. So our numbers now are usually in the mid-40s, 9 through 12. Kid you not, we used to have 17, 18 kids in a freshman class, let alone the 45 in the varsity. So, Scott, I guess what I'm saying is there's got to be a reason, along with our school district being a little bit smaller, but there's got to be more to it than that. It's got to be that time commitment that as kids get older, they don't want to do it and they fall to the wayside. And then a whole nother discussion could be, you could start sometime, would be youth football.
Love to have a discussion about that.
Well, I'll tell you one of my favorite stories, all right? 2 years ago, we're getting ready to play Marion Local. And I'm talking to Tim Goodwin, Final Four, for the game. I said, Tim, I'm just kind of curious, you've got, in my opinion, the greatest program in the history of Ohio. I said, do your kids, you get started early in football? What's one of your big keys? He goes, oh, no. He goes, we don't allow youth football at Marion Local. The first time a kid plays football at Marion Local is 7th grade.
Yeah. I think there's maybe one or two schools down there.
And he said, we don't want parents coaching our kids in 5th and 6th grade and 3rd and 4th grade.
That would be a great podcast because I'm a big proponent of not leagues, 1.5 hours a week, keeping it light, keeping them hungry. We're also battling other sports that started at 2 years old. So there's a little bit different per community, but I would love to see everybody compete at a youth level like they do down there.
And I think it's true of a lot of sports. And I'll never forget this when Robin and our 2 daughters were playing back in the early 2000s. And I'll never forget that when they started for the first time Sunday League. I can't remember what grade Jenna was in, but I was furious. A Sunday League? Because being a head coach, that was one of the few times I got to spend family time with my family all day at home, right? Oh no, now we're off playing basketball with some 5th and 6th grade girls on Sundays. And I don't think you've seen numbers in basketball go up either.
So starting early and asking a lot of them. We're asking a lot of them as young kids.
Back to your point, football is starting earlier. Yeah. It's earlier, it's longer. Does that have something to do with the decrease in numbers in a lot of schools? I wonder.
I just think, we said it before with the playoff thing. Football is a unique sport, okay? And I studied this a long time ago. It's a sport of attrition. You are always going to lose X amount of kids each year. And I think the earlier you start that, especially when kids aren't very mature, not only physically but mentally, you may ruin a kid at a very early age just because they weren't mentally ready to play the game of football. Football's different in that regard. And, that's why I always worry about junior high numbers. Because when I look at the junior high numbers and I see, like, if you've got, it used to be at Delta, we'd have 30 kids a class in junior high. And now, you're talking like 15 or 16, and you're like, okay, 7th grade team's got 15 kids out, they're going to lose a couple next year. They're going to lose a few more their freshman year. And the next thing you know, you got 7 or 8 seniors, and that's a disaster. It's a disaster. And I think those factors of youth football and all those other types of things, again, you want them hungry. You want them to really miss something. And I think all of the things that we've thrown, we keep moving that line, as you say. It has, we're throwing more and more at them. And there's a lot of other choices to do. I get that. But if we can't inject into them the love of the game of football, just to love it, then we're going to have some trouble. And I think, Bill, I mean, it was like you had to have like 65 kids back in the day to make a team go, because you had to have your varsity kids and you had to have a JV group. And who'd ever thought about playing freshmen on a Friday night? And last year we played 4 or 5 at times. And it's like, wow.
Sam, tell me, I wanted your perspective in just what you've seen. And again, you've had a little higher level experience in terms of Perrysburg. Is the game better? Is it healthier than it was a generation or two ago, generations being 7, 8 years, with all this expansion, contact days, calendar, playoff? Is the game better, or have we crossed the line and asked for too much?
I haven't seen the game improve
either
because of those things, but I also think we're fortunate in this area, and I'm sitting by 2 of them right now that, we have very good coaches that, even though the OHSAA has added these things, I think that good coaches have done a good job of not jumping full force on all of these things and still tailoring back to keep all those things in our mind of we still want kids, to be kids. And because they're giving us all of this stuff doesn't mean we're going to jump on it and take advantage of all that stuff. Now some of it we have to with the 16-man playoff. You can't, not going to bow out of the playoffs if you got a great team. But, as far as the more practices during the summer goes, that we can work with that and not, do exactly what they're giving us the ability to do. But also talking about it's funny you said that about Tim Goodwin, because I remember when I was coaching for Matt Kriegel, and he actually sent me the article about, how Marion Local doesn't start tackle football until 7th grade in junior high, and they play flag football. And I read that article and I was like, man, that is exactly how I feel. For multiple reasons I can remember, I don't think that me waiting until junior high to put pads on, and my brother and I used to go out and when we got our pads and run into a tree, we were so excited to get these pads in the junior high.
Now that is football to me right there.
I can't say that I would have been any better of a football player, shall I got pads in 3rd and 4th, which to me is ridiculous, but some kids are doing that these days, and some people feel like that's the way to go. But I mean, in 3rd grade, I was still throwing the ball really far and thinking I was going to be a quarterback. I still enjoy doing that stuff, and I don't want to take that away from kids.
Yeah.
I want everybody to be able to go out there and catch the ball, and that's why I'm such a believer in flag football. And when you can look at programs like Tim Goodwin, and I sat down in the clinic and listened to the Avon coach talk, and he's had a great run going. And they don't do tackle football either. They're big into the flag, so. I know those are 2 great examples.
Well, we here at Liberty Center have a pretty big youth program. It's flag, and we do it because of what Mike's talking about. Love. We want to give them a uniform, give them a ball, let them run around. They do that, and it's an hour and a half a week for our kids, and I think it's helped us infuse love. Mm-hmm. Like, we're not asking them to go compete in leagues. We don't make it mandatory. We got 210, 215 kids out there, K through 6. So I think there's ways to, as you see, I like the word tailor. You can tailor these things for your community, but you want to make it fun and enjoyable and infuse the love for the game, because I think the calendar is starting to kill our game. I think we're starting to hurt people, meaning they don't want to play the game anymore. It's too much of a commitment. 202 days of your life in some calendars, I think that's a lot for a kid, Lynn.
Yeah, for sure. Our podcast is always unscripted. We got kind of way off the playoff avenue, which
well, 16
happens.
games, too much calendar, spring football. It's all right there, man.
It is. It all ties together.
It's all ties together.
Yeah, we were going to talk about the playoffs, but we got a little off topic there a little bit. But going back to the playoffs, there's been a lot of people that have said, well, get rid of a game in the regular season. Is that doable in your mind to go to 9 games in the regular season, lose a game? That shrinks the season a little bit for us if we got to 12 or back to 8.
I don't think it's going to address the issue of the 16 teams. It's not going to address it. It's going to put a strain on athletic departments, because a lot of athletic departments really count on football and the gates from those games in their annual budget, for sure. But I don't think it's going to make a big difference. Yeah, it's going to cut a week back, but part of this whole thing about these 16 teams is a competitive tournament, a tournament that means something, a tournament that's not just, a participation award. Hey, I made it. Let me hang a banner. Really? We were 3-7. I wonder the question. In our gyms, we've had a banner that has OHSAA state playoffs. You go to an 8, 3-7, and you make the playoffs. Do you put that banner up there? Do you put that up there that you made the play? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
You see it on resumes. Qualified for the playoffs.
For sure, I guess.
You dig in and you're 3-7. What are we talking about?
I guess. So I don't think that's a solution to it. Maybe in the grand scheme of things, I'm not going to week off of it, I guess. But I think what we have to start with when we talk about this playoff circumstances, in my opinion, we start with the competitive level of this, what's going on with this, and then this, and next to that is the length of season for those that have to go through it.
Bill?
Yeah, and remember, that maybe knocking the week off would help with the longevity of the season, initial glance, but you've got a lot of great rivalry games. Non-league
Well, you
games.
think about Defiance Napoleon.
Oh,
Defiance
across the
plays
state
in
of
a
Ohio,
10
some of your greatest
yeah.
rivalries are the first week or 2 weeks.
That's the specialness, right?
Yeah, that makes it special. So you go back to what Mike said. Why give up that great rivalry game, getting ready for your league, and you're not always sharp in those first couple weeks you'd like to be, and then you're sacrificing that for that non-competitive first round of the playoffs. I don't think it's the answer, even though it shortens the season.
Yeah, I guess my question to those who say that would be, so you're telling me that we've had something that's been stable for decades as far as 10 football games. And, you tell the kids you got 10 games, you're guaranteed 10, you're playing for 1 a week. And then throughout these past 10 years, we've added games to the end. So instead of tailoring back those, we want to take away from what the base has always been. Makes zero sense to me. Why wouldn't we then start back at the top where we widen that plate so much and start saving our bodies and taking away games up there that we added on to than back here? That just makes no sense to me.
And I always find it interesting. The OHSAA people will say, well, you only have to play 8 to qualify. Just play 8 games if you think it's too much football. Mm-hmm. Well, are you going to give the schools some revenue in the playoffs then, because you're taking 2 games away from them for revenue? Are you going to give them a piece of the pie in the playoffs?
Yeah, some revenue sharing would be nice,
Yeah,
wouldn't it, Sam? And let's have
whole
a
nother topic.
podcast on that. But I wanted to. There's been a big discussion about the basketball NCAA tournament. Collegiately, kind of making the regular season just kind of not important. We could be getting there in football at some point if we continue to grow and expand the regular season, the rivalry games. Well, we're qualifying for playoffs. We got this long playoff run ahead of us. I think you start to numb yourself to the importance of some of those early games when you're so focused on playoff expansion, playoff revenues. I just feel like we've gotten too playoff heavy. I don't know there's a full appreciation and recognition sometimes of that regular season. That's how I feel about it with this expansion.
Yeah, and I think if we start going down that road, then we're going to start seeing during the season not competitive games.
We see some of that now. We're seeing some of that now, yeah.
Well, we're going to be a lot more likely to see coaches, my kid's a little bump this week, instead of kind of those lifelong lessons that we teach kids of, hey, I know you're a little sore right now, but we got to go out and compete, because there's going to be a day in your life where you're not feeling too hot, but you got to get up and go to work, and those types of lessons. And now we're going to get to the point where, well, hey, this game doesn't count because everybody makes the playoffs, and we'll just save you for then, and so don't play this game. And I don't know, that's not what I grew up around, and hope to God it never gets to that point.
Yeah. You go to 12, and I've heard a lot of coaches say the top 4 are going to get a bye, obviously. They don't like the bye. Give me some perspective, insight. If you were a top 4 seed, what do you think of the bye? How would you use it? Would it be a positive, negative in your mind, guys?
Well, I do wonder what some coaches would feel about that. Number one, I'm sure we would adjust as coaches, but as of right now, of today, if 12 went into effect and we're one of those first 4 seeds, I'm going to guess Bill's going to agree with me. We're not really sure right now how we'd handle that right off the top. We would have to go talk to some people about, how do you handle these bye weeks and whatnot. And, that's a great question. I don't have a good answer for it. I don't know how we would practice for it. Would we practice all those days? Who would we prepare for? We'd have to guess who we're preparing for. These are things that, as football coaches, it'd be like going back to camp days almost, where we're just maybe polishing up on fundamentals and those types of things, making sure our base plays we're repping those types of things.
You might give him a day off or two, maybe.
Might even give him a day off.
By golly, maybe a day.
Well,
how about a day for you?
Okay, so let's say on that Friday, are we even practicing on Friday? Because we're going to go to the game. Yeah. You take that question. That's a wild one.
Yeah, that'll be something that would have to be talked about a lot among, like you said, other coaches. But you know how long 2 weeks can take? You've played a regular season, and then now you're not going to play for 2 weeks because you're one of the 4 byes. it could go slow. How many days are you going to give them off? What are you going to do in those days?
Yeah.
You're going to lose that edge, are you, a little bit? So like I say, I want to go like Sam. I want to go back to eight teams, because just by going to 12, most of those teams are still playing.
Well, we are
that extra week.
You are eliminating those non-competitive teams.
You're eliminating those non-competitive games.
That's step one. That is step one.
Yeah.
And you're taking the risk off the table for the top seeds that have to play those irrelevant games. That's a perspective.
That is true.
Well, the other perspective, too, I think that would be good, okay? From the terms of length of season, it doesn't really do anything for it. But the one thing that would do, it would give those good teams that bye they need. That meaning so they can rest up, not only physically rest up, but mentally rest up a little bit. And if things go the way they've been going, it's probably going to be there's going to be a team in those top 4 that are going to benefit by not having to play 16 to get to the championship. They're only going to have to play 15.
That's another reduction in games.
For sure.
Net, as he says, net reduction,
and
which what we're fighting for here.
And we've talked about it at every level. You know, in high school football, the state champion or state runner-up, they go 18 straight weeks. You know, with the scrimmages and whatnot, plus their acclimation days. I mean, you can really start to add this thing up to about 20 straight weeks of going pretty competitive football. The one thing that nobody does that. NFL teams don't do it. College teams don't do it. They all get a bye, and you know, that would be one thing that would be nice for those top teams, those top excelling teams that have put themselves in that situation, to finally get that bye, to get those, just as coaches, we're going to have to figure out how to do it.
Sam, as you're getting the mic, the coaches I've talked to that said, I want 8 or 16, it's what you guys are talking about. I don't know how to handle that bye week. I just can't wrap my head around keeping the edge that Coach Inselmann talks about. I guess what I'm thinking, the rest itself might refresh your players a little bit. I don't like the 12 either. Our group was all about 8 because we felt like the numbers and the feedback from the championship level coaches, the older coaches that had seen the evolution of the playoffs, a lot of them wanted 8, a big chunk of them wanted 8, but then the 12 was kind of that
happy medium.
Happy medium, but is it a happy medium? And you guys are talking about it maybe kind of not being as much of a medium as you think. What do you think?
I wish I could give you an answer, because I don't know what it would like to have a bye. I can tell you the only person that I know, Andy Brungard, I think it was during the COVID time, or they had a bye, and he hated it. He did not like the bye. I don't know what went on. I can't remember that far back if you know, they didn't perform well coming off of that bye. But personally, you know, I feel like you'd have to tinker with some things and almost do it multiple times, or be in that top 4 multiple times to kind of get it down to how you want to handle that bye week. And I'll be honest with you, I'd much rather tinker around with the strength of schedule component than I would tinker around with my schedule during that bye week.
I want to ask these guys flat out, because that's the big part of this ladder conversation. I mean, let's face it, you'd struggle a little bit. It's not what you're used to, and you guys are kind of old dogs, so it's like, that's how I hunt right here. But you really worried about coming off a bye, losing the game, Bill? I mean, I know you're humble, but I mean, really, you're talking about that matchup as a 1 or 2 seed. You really fret you're going to lose that? I mean, be honest with us here. Are you really nervous about that week 2 game coming off a bye, that you're going to lose that game looking at that matchup? Is that a real fear of yours?
Well,
your first game, not your second, but that first game off a bye.
I think it would be a concern.
Okay.
Because you remember that team's going to be a little more competitive now that you're playing.
Be an 8, 9 seed.
Yeah.
So you'd rather maybe have that, would you rather have that risk and play that team you're going to beat 61-0 and lose your quarterback, or that?
I'd rather go 12 than 16.
Okay.
Okay, but I'd rather go 8 than 12.
Well, you nailed that. You nailed that. I wanted to try to corner you. No, you ain't cornering this veteran.
Yeah, you're not getting the old dog there, Scotty.
No, I missed that. But Mike, address that though. I mean, again, humble guys here, and you guys are all going to say the right things. But let me just say, as an analyst or high school, I'm not afraid for you in week 2. Just saying. But you might be, because I'm not coaching anymore. But are you afraid of that week 2 game? Maybe slipping up, not having an edge? in that 12-team
Well,
situation?
I still think that, if you're a 1 or 2 seed, you've got a pretty good football team.
You got
if you
it.
reach that level.
You got it.
And I think you're going to be okay. I really do believe that. I think there's just some fear. One is, I remember, Bill, I think, were you a 1 seed that year you played Elmwood and they had you on the ropes?
Oh, that state championship year.
Yeah, they won a state championship, and you were 1 seed, and Elmwood was an 8 seed, and
Yeah.
Elmwood all but had you beat.
Oh, baby.
And so,
That answers your question right there, Scotty.
Okay, that ends that's going to end our podcast because Bill's right and I'm wrong. That's one time, Bill. One time. That's one anomaly.
But I think it's more of a fear factor, but I think everybody knows those 13, 14, 15, 16 seeds for the most part. It's just a non-competitive game, and I'm with Bill. I would prefer to go 12 rather than 16. I'm an 8 guy as well. I've said that from the very beginning. I thought we had it right, but at the same time, I think that we would figure out ways to make sure that we're ready, and yet at the same time get some mental rest. I think if you play it right as a coach, you're going to have your team ready to play and ready to go and fire on all cylinders. I think part of this for us as coaches is just the fear of the unknown of how we would all handle it. But there's no doubt at some point 13, 14, 15, 16 has to go away because just from the competitive standpoint, it's just not good. It's not good at all.
Yeah, for sure. Forgot what I was going to add. Oh, strength of schedule. If there's a strength of schedule, how much bearing do you want it to have maybe on your schedule? Would you schedule different if there was a strength of schedule component built in to your playoff seeding? And do we need that? If we go back to 8, do we need to seed the playoff better?
Well, I think strength of schedule is always good. You're finding out who played the toughest teams, who came out on top in most of those games. In our situation, the NWOL has always been a great league. I've always felt that our league is competitive enough. Now, do I want to have a brutal non-league schedule? No. But I want to have that one good game, and we have Grove. Mm-hmm. Okay? So to me, strength of schedule is great. I don't want to get a brutal non-league schedule and then be the smallest school in the league and go into the NWOL. But that's our situation. It might be different for other coaches.
I think it'd have to be something you tinker with depending on your league. If your league is not competitive or they don't win a lot of games, then maybe you do need to schedule those out-of-conference games. But if you're in a competitive league, then you don't have to worry about it. But like I said, I mean, I'm only saying if there has to be a change, then let's look at that change. Again, I like the 8, and I know there's going to be an outsider once in a great while that maybe was a 9 and didn't get in and could make that run. But again, in the percentage and in the long term, again, they had it right with 8.
You're going to find the cream of the crop.
And, I can tell you that even my first year at Perrysburg, we were D1 at the time, and we ended up being an 8. And we traveled to Nordonia and got spanked. So even as an 8 against a 1, I remember they threw first play of the game, threw a long touchdown pass over our head, and they were so much faster than we were. And, so there was already that discrepancy in the teams for a 1v8. And again, we're talking a 1 versus 16, or even in
Sam,
Division 1, a 1 versus 16.
The numbers speak to more of your situation, not the relic Elmwood game that we're going to build an entire case to prove Barrett wrong. But I do think there is that was the thing on 12 is I think I want to get that. Yeah, thanks, Mike. You're supposed to be a part of us. You just killed the whole podcast. You jerk.
Let me add this though. That's what is the goal of the state football playoffs? Now we're talking about football. I'm not talking about basketball or baseball, where, especially let's use basketball because the tournament can be magical and all those different types of things. In the end, what we're trying to do in Ohio is we're trying to crown a state champion. That is the bottom line. And, a strength of schedule component is really going to add to make sure that everybody who's legitimately, whether it's 12 or whether it's 8, is going to slide into that group. And if you're not that, if you're a team from the MAC, okay, and you're concerned about not getting enough wins, but yet you're a good football team and you've got the strength of schedule component, it's going to slide you in there. and you're going to be able to still do your damage, rather than, if you're, a team that's not very good and you're sitting at 2-8, 3-7, and you've got to drive up here from wherever they drove from up here to Liberty Center last year, and at the end of the first quarter, they wish they would have never made the trip. Those are the types of things we're trying to eliminate, and there's a lot of them. As you said, that 33 points. Number 1 seed average, what are we doing?
I think the coaches association
39.7.
39.
Okay. I do think the motivation, guys, for the coaches association back when they did the initial was to capture some of those teams that were good enough. Napoleon, good enough to win a couple games, but
I would say that was more misseeding on the first two teams that they played.
But that's the idea.
If you know.
Right.
Like that Springfield team.
For sure.
They were a lot better than a 12 seed.
100%.
Now, I don't know that with the strength of schedule, does that get them to an 8 seed where they got into a 8-team playoff? I don't know.
But I think the motivation to get to 12 was right, because there was teams that were missing playoffs, and they just want to capture those teams that deserve to be in. But
I want to add one more thing to that. When you put in that strength of schedule component too, we don't know what, okay, so we're having some outliers that over time, in the old way, have been able to make some runs. With the strength of schedule, we don't know what that does to the shuffle to the teams up above too, that maybe those outliers wouldn't have been able to make those runs with that component in there. You following me?
Yeah.
And I think that's a big deal.
It is a huge deal and a lot of unknown, and I think that's why guys were hesitant on the 8 team in our survey, and they didn't get that choice that first time around. It was 12 or 16.
Right.
So I think the 8 was great for a long time. I would have liked to have seen that initial coach association provide the 8-team option, and you would have seen, I think, a number that was more representative to some of the things you've talked about, Sam, and what you've mentioned, but we didn't get that. We had some uneven surveying. We decided to ask coaches, the rank and file, about their commentary, and we read a lot of interesting commentary about why 8 and why 12, and we learned a lot, and that was the idea. And I think it was a really fruitful feedback that we got on that.
You have one coach that coaches at a powerhouse in Ohio telling you, well, our fans aren't even coming to the first 2 rounds. And it's a fanatical football community. I mean, football is it.
Said that on a conference call with many people saying, guys,
our fans don't even care
the first 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You go to that, and we won't mention names, but 78 people that usually we get 3,078 people. Like this is happening in communities on opt-outs and boycotts, and I don't know how it's not making it back to the guys at the OHSAA, but it's out there and it's growing. It's growing.
Well, at least give those schools some of the piece of the revenue from the tickets, like we used to.
Oh man,
and that's another topic for
another
day.
One.
But
that's a big one.
Okay,
you want to get ADs riled? Let's get to that.
You want to add all these games? Well, then give the revenue back to the schools where it should go. You're working for the schools. That's what the OHSAA should be doing. It's a nonprofit. They should be building their bank account at the expense of schools.
Hey, we were told we're building the account for a calamity. I'm fortunate enough to help be a guy that runs a couple non-profits, and we had that kind of carryover proportionally. People be going, what are you doing? Why so much money? And I think that's, unfortunately, when you read some Blade articles and you do research, people are starting to kind of come to the conclusion, is this really about the players, or is it about the money? And I think that ultimately that's probably the last thing I'd want to talk about. Not that you're going to sit here and say, yeah, or whatever, but I just feel, what's the motivation? We should be motivated to provide kids a tremendous experience that they're worthy of, that they desire, and everybody benefit from that experience. What I'm seeing is certain smaller groups are benefiting from it. Organizations benefit more than players.
They represent these guys right here. Is what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, amen to that.
And the communities and the student athletes. But they're ignoring everything that these guys want and that the Coaches Association fought for years. I've talked to Coaches Association people that have spent decades in the association, and they wanted the 12, and they fought for that. They did the surveys, and they just said, we're not going to pay any attention. Why? Why are we not paying attention? You represent those people. And you and I in our group is trying to represent these guys. We don't want to try to pad our wallet we want to try to be a force for these folks.
And the players.
And the players.
Well,
and protect them.
Yeah.
Not only that, guys, but I think for the communities as well, and the importance of that. You mentioned about in the first couple of rounds where it's not only they're not competitive football games, it's not competitive for the community either because they're choosing not to go. They're speaking out volumes as well.
You said you went to a playoff game and you said, who wants this? No one's even here.
Yeah, I mean, it was a second round game. We got knocked out in the first round. We got an opponent that we're playing next year for the first time. They were in the second round of the playoffs. A couple coaches and I went and watched the game, and I didn't get there till 10 minutes. I was concerned. I didn't get there till 10 minutes before kickoff. Where were we going to set? Where were we going to set? I could sit anywhere I wanted. And I was like, are you kidding me? That's what I think I miss about the old days of the playoffs and when it was a special thing. It was really super special.
It was an event.
Because the community, they've caught on to it. They've caught on to it as well. Especially the teams that are far away, they're not going to travel when their team's not very good. They know what's going to happen, and there are groups that are part of the teams that they don't even want to go to these events, and it's like, wow, that's saying a lot about where we've grown to with this 16 team format, and I think it's something that we need to really take a look at. We've talked about the kids, we've talked about all those things. Let's talk about the communities as well. And how they're seeing this too, and then they know where their money's going. They know it's not coming back within their school, and those things are a shame.
It's a financial burden on some of these families.
Oh, can you?
16 weeks, $15 admission, 10 parking, concessions.
And then,
Right.
I mean,
and then you're traveling for these, regional
Week.
state semifinals.
After week.
Look at the Kirtland. We're talking about Liberty Center. You and I both
Marion.
live in the community, but think about Marion Local and Kirtland and
For sure.
the Coldwaters who year after year after year are doing this. The Irontons. There's select few that are doing this every year, and not everybody's financially set.
Bill, talk about that and what Mike talked about a little bit. Where's the energy at? Where's the energy at in communities today for the first two rounds, that first game? Maybe you're seeing something different. I ain't seeing it, but maybe you might be. I don't see it. Do you?
Well, if you remember what Mike said about selling all those T-shirts, I don't think it's as big a deal now selling shirts. We having a pep rally. Why would you have a pep rally for the first round? Well, let me tell you, back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, you had a pep rally.
You did.
Okay? And then I'll never forget, in 97, we were the only team to beat state champ Liberty Center. What a game that was, huh, in the regular season. And we played them in a snowball at Finley. When you got in the playoffs, and then boom, 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 3 weeks later, you got a state champ, it's a big deal.
It is.
We over-examine things. More of anything is usually not good. I don't care if it's a favorite food. If you have it too often, your favorite pizza, it does. And then more and more and more.
Moderation.
Yeah.
Moderation.
Sports and time putting into it, it's not as special. And it goes back to what Mike said. You gotta want to do it and love to do it. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of that specialness, what football always had, that specialness of getting in, and this is a big deal. It's not as big as it used to be.
Of course, you had to get in the only loss that we had, 97. I appreciate that, Bill. Thank you. We mentioned the state championship, but you got it in there a little bit. Sam, maybe I tease. That's
I was
pretty,
actually there.
That was a great
at that
game. That was a great game.
I was in the stands.
Are we missing something here in Northwest Ohio? Is there energy out there for week one of a 16-team region out there where you're from, or are you feeling the same thing we're seeing?
Well, we haven't had the luxury of making it past, this is only going on my third year there. So, we were able to get 2 home playoff games the past 2 years. So it was a big deal to us, but I'll be honest with you, I don't look behind me. I don't know, how many are there compared to what it used to be as Eastwood was making their runs with the smaller before it was 16. So I can't honestly answer that question. I can't give you an honest opinion.
You got the kettle corn.
I have heard a lot about the kettle corn.
You've eaten some kettle corn, Coach. Come on, man. You eat some kettle corn.
What's that place? Bass Pro. I've had that, but no. I can't eat during Friday. I don't even eat Fridays. I can't eat.
I'm tapping out. I have more questions, but I don't want to keep these guys here all night. I know they have families.
Yeah, they do. Wait, they're football coaches.
No,
well,
no.
one of Coach Inselmann figured it out. We're going to be here. We're going to bring my wife because I want to be with her. I invited my wife. She said I want no part of what you're talking about. So
Yeah.
they're happy to get rid of me.
Yeah. Sam, Bill, Mike, thank you guys so much. It's been an honor, and thank you for sharing some insight. It's been really interesting to get some perspective from guys that I respect.
Yeah.
And
Big-time football coaches, big-time programs.
Yeah, and thank you, Scott and Lynn, for what you're doing. And we understand as coaches that there's different perspectives, but the great thing is you got to be able to talk about it and debate it and look at the pros and the cons, and then hopefully make the best educated decision you can. And
part of our
go from there.
education was to listen to you guys. We came.
And I just got tired of you guys, the coaches, hearing what you're saying and nobody is listening to you. It drives me nuts that nobody will listen to the coaches. Why are we not listening to them?
This long form allows for exploration of a lot of things. That's why this was so cool to do this, because we got a survey. We've talked to lots of coaches, but we didn't get a chance to do the deep dive. And this reveals a lot to me. That was my whole goal here. I knew I think instinctively what was wrong for kids and coaches, what I thought was wrong. But then I hear guys that have a pretty credible position in the Coaches Association, different things I've learned. This has been extremely helpful, and I'm really grateful for your time.
Yeah,
I'm grateful.
Yeah, me too. Thank you, Scotty. Appreciate it. Thank you. And if you're out there listening, give us some feedback, either side of it.
Yep.
We're glad to discuss it with you.
The more opinions, the better. The more feedback,
Absolutely.
the better.
That's what we want to get. And we'll be back here in the coming weeks with more on this subject.
A series of 2 or 3, maybe 4.
Trying to do 4. Yeah. Stay tuned. Thank you to the Gerken Companies, our presenting sponsor. Thank you to our coaches tonight. And thank you, Scotty. Appreciate you collaborating on this with me. We'll be back. Have a great week, everyone.